The faint moonlight filtered through the dirty windows of the orphanage, casting long shadows in the dark hallway. Ryan clutched Jungkook's hand tightly, her smaller frame trembling as they crept towards the back door. She whispered, her voice barely audible. Her words betrayed the fear swirling in her chest. Jungkook, they won't, he replied firmly, his voice steady but low. He glanced back at her, his expression sharp. She nodded, swallowing hard. The pain from the bruises on her arms was nothing compared to the humiliation she had faced earlier that day. The headmistress' harsh slap still echoed in her ears, and she knew if Jungkook hadn't stepped in. They reached the back door. Jungkook knelt, his fingers prying open the loose panel he had worked on for days. The lock gave with the faint click, and the cold night air rushed in. Go, he whispered, giving her a gentle push. Jungkook, keep up, he muttered, grabbing her hand as they broke into a run. The streets were eerily silent, the occasional flicker of streetlights casting them into brief darkness. Ryan, where are we going? She panted, struggling to keep up with Jungkook. Out of the city, Jungkook said. His voice had an extra edge of urgency as his eyes darted around, checking for any signs of pursuit. We will figure out the rest once we are safe. After nearly an hour of running, they reached. Ryan, I can't go anymore, she stammered, her legs shaking. Jungkook knelt in front of her, his hands on her shoulder. Jungkook, it's okay, you did great, just breathe. He reached into his jacket, pulling out a flyer and showing it to her. Ryan, what's this? She asked, her voice weak. Jungkook, it's a job ad, Jungkook said. A private estate outside the city, they are hiring staff, we will go there. Ryan, but will they even take us? Jungkook's jaw tightened. Jungkook, they don't have to know everything about us. I will make sure they take us. Let's go. Ryan, now? Jungkook, yeah, it's really far. We will reach there by morning. Ryan, are we going to run again? I can't, Oppa. My legs are paining so much. She whined. Jungkook said, shaking his head. Jungkook, we just have to find a taxi. It will take us there. Ryan, taxi? Do we have money? Jungkook smirked and pulled out some amount of money from his pocket, making her shocked. Wait, from where did you get it? Jungkook, I stole it from the orphanage. Ryan, what if they had caught you? Jungkook, I'm good at it. Come, get on. He said as he kneeled down with his back towards her so she could get on. Ryan, are you sure, Oppa? Jungkook, yes, I have been carrying you here and there since childhood. We just have to work for some time. Ryan chuckled and got on his back, wrapping her hands around his neck and legs around his waist as he started moving away from the train yard. The moon hung high in the sky as Jungkook walked on the busy city road with Ryan still on his back. It's been 1 hour and she had fallen asleep. As Jungkook looked around and found a few taxi drivers, he approached them cautiously. Jungkook, we have to go to the private estate owned by the businessman. Of course, everyone knew them. They are six brothers living together and richest businessmen of the country. Jungkook had watched them often on television in news and ads. One of them quickly agreed as he gently placed Ryan on the back seat. He is 17-year-old and Vine is 14 years old. Their parents were a working couple. His father was a doctor and while his mother was a professor in university. They have six older brothers too, whom they remembered only by nicknames. It's been 11 years. Vine and Jungkook got separated from their older siblings and were taken into an orphanage by the orphanage staff forcefully, and that's when the torture started. They used to get beaten up, were forced to do chores around the orphanage. It was all too much to take for them, but they couldn't do anything at that time. Jungkook sighed, remembering every painful situation they had been through. He looked at Vayan and took her on his lap, hugging her close to him, like he was afraid that she will disappear if he loosened his grip, even a little. He kissed the top of her head, silently promising. After 5 hours, it was 8 o'clock in the morning. Jungkook hadn't slept for a second the whole way here. He gently woke up Vayan as she opened her eyes, rubbing them to adjust her vision to the brightness. The car came to a halt in front of a large mansion as Jungkook came out and paid the taxi driver. He said, handing her a water bottle that she took from the taxi. Vayan drank the water, still looking shocked at the mansion. Ryan, it's a freaking palace. Are we going to work here? Jungkook, yes, if they hire us. You remember Kim Namjoon? He said as he held her wrist softly and guided her towards the mansion. A few bodyguards stood at the entrance, stopped them. Jungkook, we are here for the job, he said, showing them the flyer. They are hiring people. Guard, come in. The large gates of the mansion opened and both of them followed the guard inside. The guard led them through the mansion and Vayan couldn't stop herself from glancing around in awe. The place was massive, far bigger than anything she had ever imagined. Everything from the Jungkook walked beside her, his expression calm, though she could feel the tension in the way he held her wrist. He wasn't nervous. Jungkook never showed fear, but she knew he was being careful. They stopped in front of two large double doors. Guard, wait here. Ryan tugged lightly on Jungkook's sleeve. Ryan, Oppa, what if they don't hire us? Jungkook turned to her, his voice steady. Jungkook, they will. Don't worry, just stay quiet and let me talk. Before she could reply, the doors opened and the guard mentioned for them to enter. The room was huge with a long wooden table in the center and the floor to ceiling windows that let in the morning light. Seated at the table were six men, all dressed sharply in suits, their eyes focused on them the moment they stepped inside. Ryan felt a shiver down her spine. These weren't ordinary businessmen. There was something about the way they carried themselves, cold and calculating, like they could see through every lie you had ever told. Jungkook bowed slightly, his hand on Ryan's back to guide her forward. The man sitting at the head of the table, Namjoon, leaned back in his chair. He looked young, but the authority in his sharp eyes made it clear he was the one in charge. Namjoon, you are here for the job position. Jungkook, yes, sir. Namjoon nodded, his expression unreadable. Namjoon, your names? Jungkook, I am Kim Jungkook, and this is my sister Kim Wayan. Namjoon's eyes flicked to Wayan briefly before returning to Jungkook. He gestured to the men around him. Jungkook straightened slightly, his tone calm but firm. Jungkook, we are hardworking, sir. It doesn't matter if we can get the job done. Seokjin raised an eyebrow but didn't respond, leaning back in his chair. The man sitting next to Seokjin, Yoongi, was watching them. His dark eyes were sharp, and there was something unsettling about the calmness in his posture. Yoongi, why this extent? There are plenty of places hiring. Why come all the way here? Jungkook hesitated for a moment. Jungkook, because I know this place is run by the best. If we work here, we will learn from the best. Yoongi's lips twitched, almost like he was amused, but he said nothing. On the other side of the table, Hoseok chuckled slightly. His sharp eyes held a mix of curiosity and playfulness. Jungkook's jaw tightened slightly, but he kept his tone respectful. Jungkook, she will work as a maid. She is capable and willing to learn. Hoseok smirked, leaning back in his chair. Hoseok, protective, aren't we? Jungkook didn't respond, his gaze steady. Taeyong, who had been silent so far, tilted his head slightly, his piercing gaze fixed on Jungkook. There was something almost lazy about his posture, but his gaze was anything but. Taeyong, do you always speak for her? He raised an eyebrow, clearly intrigued, but he didn't press further. The last man, Jimin, spoke up next. His voice was calm and quiet, but the sharpness in his tone was impossible to miss. Jimin, and what happens if we say no? Jungkook, then we will leave and find another opportunity. But I can promise you, sir, you won't regret hiring us. The room fell silent for a moment. Wine glanced nervously at the man, her heart pounding in her chest. Finally, Namjoon spoke. Namjoon, Jungkook, you will train with the guards. We will see if your skills match your confidence. Why? You will report to the headman. You will both stay in the staff quarters. One mistake and you are out. Understood? Jungkook, yes, sir, thank you. Namjoon gestured to the guard by the door. As they turned to leave, Seokjin spoke, his tone laced with sarcasm. Seokjin, don't get too comfortable. Most people don't last a week here. Jungkook didn't reply, his hand resting lightly on Ryan's back as they followed the guard out of the room. Jungkook, we will be fine. His voice was steady, but the look in his eyes was one of a quiet determination. I will make sure of it. After 2 days, Ryan wiped the sweat off her forehead as she placed the freshly cleaned dishes onto the rack. The kitchen was bustling with maids and chefs, moving quickly to meet the endless demands of the household. It had only been 2 days since she started working. Headmaids, Ryan stopped dartling and get the dining table set. The bosses want breakfast in 10 minutes. Yes, ma'am, Ryan said quickly, grabbing the tray of plates and utensils. She balanced the heavy load as she hurried to the dining room. His sharp eyes flickered to her as she entered, making her freeze for a second. Namjoon, you are late. Ryan, I'm sorry, sir, I will. Namjoon, less talking, more working. His voice was calm, but the authority in it made her rush to set the table faster. As she carefully placed the plates and silverware, she felt another presence enter the room. Turning slightly, she saw Yoongi leaning against the doorframe, his expression as unreadable as ever. Yoongi, make sure my coffee isn't too sweet. Yoongi didn't move, his sharp gaze following her as she worked. It was like being under a microscope, and it made her hands tremble slightly as she poured his coffee. By the time the rest of the brothers arrived, the dining table was perfectly set. Hoseok, morning everyone. What's the crisis today? Namjoon glanced at him once. Namjoon, the usual. Wayan stepped back further, blending into the background as she observed them. They barely spoke to each other, but the silence was heavy, like words didn't need to. Meanwhile, Jungkook was out in the training yard, his fist tightly wrapped as he sparred with one of the senior guards. He had been paired with the biggest, most experienced guard, clearly a test from Namjoon to see if he could keep up. Hoseok appeared by the edge of the yard, watching with his arms crossed. Hoseok, not bad kid, but don't dodge, control the fight. Jungkook didn't respond, too focused on the match. He stepped back. Namjoon's voice cut through the air, calm but firm. Namjoon, enough. Jungkook stepped back immediately, his chest heaving as he tried to catch his breath. Namjoon approached. Yes, sir. Jungkook said, bowing slightly. Namjoon's gaze lingered on him for a moment before he turned and walked away, leaving Jungkook with a new wave of determination. Later that evening, Wayan sat on her bed in the small staff quarters, her hands cradling her head. The day had been exhausting and her body ached from all the running around. She let out a quiet sigh, staring at the small lamp. He closed the door behind him and walked over to her. Jungkook, long day? Wayan nodded, not looking up. Wayan, they are so strict. I feel like I'm going to mess up every second. Jungkook crouched in front of her, his dark eyes softening. Jungkook, you are doing fine. Wine, it's not just them. I feel like I don't belong here. This place is so big and everyone's so perfect. I'm just Jacob placed a hand on her shoulder, his grip firm but comforting. Hey, don't say that you are stronger than you think, Wine. We have been through wars, remember? Jungkook smiled faintly and tapped her forehead gently. Jungkook, you have already made it this far. You ran away from that horrible place. You are here now and you are not alone. I'm here, okay? I won't let anything happen to you. Wine sniffled, wiping her tears. Jungkook, I promise. His voice was steady and filled with quiet determination. I will protect you no matter what. Ryan managed a small smile, leaning her head against his shoulder. Ryan, thank you, Oppa. Jungkook wrapped an arm around her, holding her close. Meanwhile, the warmth of the room didn't match the heavy silence among the six brothers. They sat scattered around, each lost in their own thoughts. Namjoon was perched on the edge of his seat, hands clasped tightly together. Seokjin leaned back, his arms crossed, staring at the ceiling. Taeyong and Jimin were huddled at the far end of the couch, their gazes fixed on the flickering flames in the fireplace. Finally, Hoseok spoke, his voice breaking the silence. Hoseok, so you really think Jungkook and Ryan? But their names are same, he said softly, staring into the fire, and their ages match too. It's possible. Yoongi let out a small sigh. Yoongi, it's not just about names and ages. A lot of people share same names and ages. We don't have a strong proof. Jimin, maybe we don't need proof, he said quietly. Maybe we just know. Namjoon, it's not that simple, Jimin. His voice was calm, but there was a weight to his words. We need to be sure before jumping to the conclusions. Namjoon sighed deeply, leaning back in his chair. Namjoon, I remember something. Swain had those bright eyes and little dimples, and Jungkook, he always followed me around, calling me him. He paused, his voice growing softer, but everything after that night feels blurry. Hoseok, that's right, he said, his tone heavy. It's all messed up in my head. I keep replaying it, trying to figure out what we could have done differently. Seokjin let out a frustrated breath. Seokjin, there was nothing we could have done. We were kids, Yoongi. We could have done more. His voice was calm but sharp, cutting through the room like a knife. Yoongi. Jungkook went back for Ryan and we didn't stop him. Jungkook, he didn't want to leave her behind. He whispered, guilt evident in his voice, and because of that, he got separated from us. The room went quiet again, memories of the night flooding back like a wave. Their father, a doctor, and their mother, a university professor, had always been loving and hardworking, but their lives were shattered in an instant. Namjoon, it wasn't supposed to happen. Seokjin, a mistake that cost us everything. Hoseok, they burnt our house. I can still hear mom yelling at us to run. He shook his head, his voice trembling. We didn't even have time to think. The mafia later got to know because of the wrong information they attacked on the wrong people. He tried to find the brothers again but couldn't. After this incident, all six of them joined Mafia to take revenge and succeeded in it. Taeyong and Jungkook, he whispered, his eyes glistening. He ran back for Ryan. He didn't even hesitate. He just went. Jimin, we thought Yoongi, we should have gone back for him. His voice was cold, but there was flicker of pain in his eyes. Instead, we ran like cowards. Namjoon, we didn't have a choice, he said firmly through a tone lacked conviction. Mom and Dad wanted us to survive. This is Seokjin, but Jungkook and Ryan didn't survive with us, he said bitterly. They ended up wherever they ended up, and we weren't there for them. Hoseok, what if those two are really our siblings? Namjoon ran a hand through his hair, his jaw tight. Namjoon, then we will figure it out. Yoongi, and if they are not, what if this is all just some coincidence? Namjoon, then they stay and do the work they are hired for. His voice was quiet, but there was a firmness in his tone. But I'm not going to ignore this, not after everything. Hoseok, we owe it to them to find out the truth. After all, we failed them once, we can't fail them again. Namjoon nodded, his gaze hardening. Namjoon, we will figure this out together. The room fell silent once more. Whatever the truth was, next day. The night was calm and the estate was bathed in soft moonlight. Ryan had stayed behind in the study to finish adjusting the shelves, her usual course for the evening. The large room was silent save for the occasional crackle of the fireplace. As she reached the end of one of the tall bookshelves, her eyes fell on a book that stood out. Its leather cover was worn and frayed, unlike the pristine volume surrounding it. Something about it piqued her curiosity, and after hesitating for a moment, when she opened it, she realized it wasn't a book but a journal. The handwriting inside was neat but hurried, as though the writer had poured their thoughts onto the page in a rush. Her eyes skimmed over the words as she froze. When a specific the fire spread faster than we expected. We couldn't save our siblings, Jungkook and Ryan. Jungkook went back to take Ryan, and we lost them both that night. I can still hear their cries in my mind. Her hands began to tremble as she reread the passage, her heart pounding in her chest. She turned a few more pages, and the writer had continued recounting the same night, the fire, the chaos, and the unbearable loss of two siblings. She might not remember everything, but Jungkook remembered it all. Ryan whispered to herself, her voice shaky and barely audible. Is this about us? Before she could think further, the door to the study creaked open. Jungkook stepped inside, his brows furrowed in concern as his eyes landed on her. Ryan, what are you doing here? Jungkook said, walking towards her. His tone was firm but carried the warmth of an older brother. Ryan quickly hid the general behind her back, her movement hurried and clumsy. Ryan, I was just cleaning up and saw this on the shelf. She stammered, her voice unsteady. Jungkook immediately noticed the pale look on her face and the way her hands trembled. Jungkook, what's wrong, Ryan? Did something happen? Why are you acting so strange? Before she could respond, the door opened wider and Namjoon stepped into the room. He stopped on his track when he saw the two of them. His sharp eyes moved between them and his expression shifted slightly as he caught sight of the leather-bound journal Ryan was trying to hide. Ryan, Namjoon said gently but firmly, but are you holding behind your back? Jungkook, Ryan, what's going on? Namjoon took a step closer, his voice soft but commanding. Namjoon, it's okay, Ryan, you can show me. I won't be upset. After a moment of hesitation, Ryan slowly brought the journal forward and held it out towards him. Namjoon's eyes widened as he recognized the journal. Immediately, his hand reached out, almost trembling, as he took it from her. Namjoon, from where did you find this? Namjoon asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Ryan, I found it on the shelf. Ryan admitted, her words rushed. I opened it and read a little. Is it true? Is what's written in there about us? Namjoon looked at her confused. Namjoon, what do you mean? Jungkook confusingly took the journal from his hand. He opened it and began scanning the pages, his expression darkening each word he read. Jungkook, wait, how do you? Jungkook said, his voice cracking slightly. It's about what happened the night we lost mom and dad. Namjoon, it's about our mom and dad. He said, his voice turned as Jungkook argued back. Jungkook, it's clearly about our parents. Namjoon, are you sure? What was your age at that time and your parents' name? Jungkook, yes, I'm sure I was 6 and Ryan was 3 years old. I don't remember their real name much. I remember their nicknames: Joon Hyung, Jin Hyung, Suga Hyung, Hobi Hyung, Tete Hyung. Namjoon eyes brimmed with unshed tears as he heard this from Jungkook. He let out a heavy sigh of relief and ran a hand through his ears before he hugged both of them tightly. Jungkook, wait, what happened? Namjoon, Jungkook, we are your older brothers. I am your Juni Hyung. Namjoon, wait, I have a picture. He quickly went over to another shelf and grabbed an album from there. He opened it and showed them many photos of little Ryan and Jungkook. Jungkook looked at all the pictures in shock as he was able to remember every single of them. Jungkook, wait. But the house was Namjoon, we have saved these on our phones. Jungkook, it's too unexpected, he said uh, as a tear slipped down his cheeks, but he wiped it off with the back of his sleeves, finally connecting all the dots. Once he saw his parents' picture, he was sure that these six brothers. Ryan stood there with teary eyes, having to witness her older brother crying. She had never seen him crying. He always have been stood strong in front of her, protected her from everyone. Namjoon pats his back and grabbed Ryan's head and hugged her too. She doesn't remember much. Jungkook, Ryan, they are our family. I told you about them. Ryan nodded, indicating she remembers everything he told her, as she also hugged Jungkook tightly. Namjoon, oh my babies, we searched for you so much, but we couldn't find you both. Namjoon, it's okay. We have got you both. You are safe. Nothing will happen now. They pulled away from the hug and Jungkook led them out to the living room where everyone were. Namjoon, guys, I have something amazing to tell. Everyone looked at them. Jungkook and Ryan are our siblings. Yoongi, what? Hoseok, are you sure? Jin, any proof? Namjoon, Jungkook remembered everything from that night. He recognized our pictures very well. Jimin, I see, I said right. He quickly came over and hugged Jungkook and Ryan, rocking them side to side, earning a chuckle from them. Jane, I can't believe finally we found them. He joined the hug, and others followed soon, making it a family hug. Jungkook, but who attacked us? Jane, a mafia got wrong information and thought our parents were his enemies, so he burnt the house. Yoongi, but don't worry, we have taken our revenge. Jungkook, what? Everyone looked at each other awhile before they shrugged their shoulders. Jane, so yeah, we are mafias now, but don't worry, you are a Jungkook. You did great, Hyung. That Buster deserves it. I wish I could also take revenge. We both got separate from you, all because of him. Hoseok, calm down. Ryan, you are right. We have met our real families now. We should focus on it. Jungkook nodded, agreeing with her as they all did a group hug. So you guys ran away from the orphanage? Ryan, yeah. They used to torture us and other children too. We had no choice. Namjoon, don't worry. Now we will take care of them. Leave it on us. After a few days, the mansion was livelier than ever. Ryan sat on the couch, flipping through a book as the afternoon sun filtered through the curtains, casting long shadows on the floor. Jungkook was beside her, sharpening a knife, though his eyes started towards her every few minutes like he was. Jungkook looked up, his expression serious. Jungkook, I've always been this like this, Angel. After everything we have been through, I'm not letting anything happen to you again. Ryan chuckled softly but didn't argue. She loved his protectiveness. Other brothers were just as doubting. Taeyong walked into the kitchen, balancing a tray of snacks. Taeyong, wine. I'd made this for you, he said cheerfully, placing them on the table in front of her. Seokjin peeked out from behind him, a frown on his face. I told you not to touch the kitchen, Taeyong. They are fine, he said decisively, turning to Ryan. Right, you will eat them, won't you? Ryan laughed and nodded. Thank you, Oppa. Namjoon appeared next, a stack of papers in his hand. Namjoon, Ryan, Jungkook, do you guys need help with anything? He asked. Anything at all? Before Ryan could answer, Jimin entered holding out a blanket. Are you both cold? Here, take this just in case. Ryan and Jungkook believed at the sudden flurry of attention, their cheeks turning pink. Ryan, we are fine, really. Yoongi leaned against the doorway, a small smirk on his face. Yoongi, they are not going to stop. You know, you might as well get used to it. Hoseok stepped forward, ruffling her hair swiftly. Hoseok, you are stuck with us now, Ryan and Cookie. This is what family does. As the brothers laughed and teased each other, Wyan glanced at Jungkook, who smiled, admiring her. Despite his quiet demeanor, she knew he was just as protective of her as the others. For the first time in years, Wyan and Jungkook felt safe. They felt loved.